Chapter 1. Cracks in Marriage. Jennifer stood on the street of a big city, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of traffic, but she seemed to be forgotten by the world, and her heart was full of confusion. The biting cold wind whistled past, scraping her face like a knife. She subconsciously wrapped the thin coat tightly on her body, but she could not dispel the chill in her heart. She looked at the passers-by in a hurry. Those busy figures were out of tune with her. She could never have imagined that the rich young lady who was once envied by everyone was now so miserable that she was wandering on the street. All the changes started on that seemingly ordinary night. That day, Jennifer worked overtime at the company until late as usual. She rubbed her sore eyes and dragged her exhausted body back home. When she gently pushed open the half-open bedroom door, the scene in front of her made her freeze in an instant, and her mind went blank. She saw Pete entangled with a blonde woman in bed. The two of them were intimate and unrestrained without any scruples. With a bang, Jennifer's bag fell to the ground uncontrollably. This abrupt sound broke the ambiguity and chaos in the room. Pete looked up in panic and hurriedly pulled the quilt to cover himself and the woman. The blonde woman was also panicked and hurriedly tidied up her messy clothes. Jennifer's eyes were red in an instant and tears were rolling in her eyes. She tried to hold back the tears that were about to burst out, and asked Pete in a trembling voice, "What's going on?" Pete sneered nonchalantly, and there was no trace of guilt in that smile, only full of ridicule. "Jennifer, you are too naive. I'm just playing, don't make a fuss." Jennifer looked at the familiar and strange man in front of her in disbelief. The husband she once loved deeply and trusted wholeheartedly. She was unwilling to lose this marriage like this, and she tearfully recounted their good memories in the past, trying to awaken Pete's conscience. But Pete became more and more impatient and even began to speak harshly. "Enough, stop pestering me, I'm tired of you." Every word was like a bullet shooting straight into Jennifer's heart, and her heart was torn to pieces. What made Jennifer even more heartbroken was that when her parents-in-law learned about all this, not only did they not stand by her side, but they accused her of being useless and unable to control her husband. The mother-in-law looked indifferent and said in a sarcastic tone, "Look at you, you are busy with work all day long and ignore Pete. It is understandable that he has a lover." When Jennifer needed support and comfort the most, they ruthlessly drove her out of the house. The father-in-law's voice was cold. "This is no longer your home, you go." Jennifer walked on the street in a daze, penniless, and her mobile phone was automatically turned off because it was out of power. She didn't know where to go and could only wander helplessly on this cold street. The cold wind blew over her and she hugged her arms tightly, but she couldn't get warm. Passing by the restaurant she had been to with Pete, the warm scene inside was in sharp contrast to her current situation. She remembered that they had a sweet dinner here and Pete had gently picked up food for her, but now all this has become a bubble. She passed by the mall where they had been together, and the window displayed beautiful clothes and jewelry. Pete would buy her things she liked without hesitation, but now she didn't even have money to buy a piece of bread. Jennifer's steps became heavier and heavier, and her body and mind were suffering great torture. It was late at night and the neon lights in the city were flashing, but Jennifer felt that the light was particularly dazzling. She sat down on a bench in a park. Her body was exhausted and her spirit was on the verge of collapse. She looked at the night sky and tears finally burst out of her eyes and flowed freely on her cheeks. She didn't understand what she had done wrong and why life was so cruel to her. The once happy and fulfilling life is now in pieces. She doesn't know if she can survive this long dark night and where the future lies. Unconsciously, the sky turned pale, and the hustle and bustle of a new day gradually spread in the city. Jennifer numbly watched the gradually lively scene around her, with mixed feelings in her heart. She stood up, patted the dust on her body, and decided not to sit and wait for death. Although she didn't know what was waiting for her ahead, she knew that she had to find a way out for herself, even if it was just a glimmer of hope. She took a deep breath, dragged her heavy steps and slowly walked into the morning mist of the city. Her figure looked particularly lonely and determined. Chapter 2. The Opportunity of Being Kidnapped. Jennifer has been wandering on the streets for several days. The night wind is icy and biting, like countless fine needles drilling into the cracks of her bones. In the past few days she relied on the occasional change from passers-by to buy some bread to barely maintain her life. At night she curled up in places that could barely shelter from the wind and rain, such as bridge holes and park benches. Her hair was messy, her clothes were stained, and she looked miserable and haggard. Late that night she dragged her legs, which were as heavy as lead, and walked alone in a dark alley, thinking about finding a slightly hidden corner to sleep. Suddenly, two tall figures rushed out of the darkness, and before she could react, they held her arms on the left and right. Jennifer widened her eyes in horror, struggling desperately, shouting for help. She kicked with all her strength, trying to break free, but only got more fierce suppression from the other party. One of the men punched her in the abdomen, and the severe pain came instantly, making her almost breathless. Then a handkerchief with a pungent smell covered her mouth and nose. She struggled hard to hold her breath, but the smell still penetrated her nasal cavity unstoppably. Her consciousness gradually blurred, the scene in front of her began to become distorted, and soon her eyes went black and she fainted. When Jennifer woke up again, she found herself tied up in a dark and damp basement. The walls of the basement were covered with moss, exuding a foul smell, and there were several puddles of sewage on the ground. Her hands were tied tightly behind her back with rough ropes, which made her wrists hurt, and her feet were tied together, unable to move. Two tall kidnappers, Jack and Tom, stood in front of her, their eyes as cold as dead water in winter. Jack had a face full of flesh and a thick and hard stubble on his chin. He held his hands in front of his chest, looked down at Jennifer, and said with a mocking face, "Your husband is really nice. He is not willing to pay $5 million. You just wait to die here." Jennifer's heart was shocked. She originally thought that even if Pete was heartless, he would try his best to save her when her life was threatened. But now it seems that she was completely wrong. Her eyes were red in an instant, and a deep despair surged in her heart, but she still held back her tears and tried to resist. She twisted her body hard, using her hands and feet to try to break free from the rope, but the rope tightened and penetrated deeply into her flesh, causing her to sweat coldly. Before she could struggle to any results, she was held down by Tom. Tom's hands clasped her shoulders tightly like a pair of pliers, making her unable to move. Just when she was full of despair, Jennifer suddenly had an idea and said calmly, "Wait, are you mistaken? My husband, he will definitely pay. Wait a little longer." She knew that she couldn't just sit there and wait for death and had to find a way to save herself. Jack and Tom looked at each other. Tom looked impatient, spat, and said, "We don't have time to waste with you." Jennifer gritted her teeth, made up her mind, and went all out. "How about this? I'll take you to kidnap my husband. He will definitely pay $30 million, and then we'll split it among 3 people. When she said this, her heartbeat accelerated rapidly, and she was nervous and expectant, wondering if the 2 kidnappers would agree. The 2 kidnappers were stunned. They obviously didn't expect Jennifer to come up with such a bold plan. They looked Jennifer up and down as if to judge whether she was playing any tricks. After a long while, Jack was the first to react. He squinted his eyes, a trace of greed flashed in his eyes, and looked at Jennifer. "This is a good idea, but you have to promise not to play tricks, otherwise you will be in trouble." Tom also echoed, "If you dare to lie to us, you will be dead." Jennifer nodded quickly, and on the surface she remained calm, but she was secretly thinking in her heart that this might be a great opportunity for revenge. She wanted to make Pete pay a heavy price for what he did. In the next few days, Jennifer began to plan the plan to kidnap Pete in detail with the kidnappers. She endured the physical discomfort and mental pressure, and with her years of understanding of Pete, she carefully told Jack and Tom about Pete's daily schedule, living habits, and places he often went. Pete goes to a fixed gym every morning to exercise. The security there is relatively loose, so we can do it there, Jennifer said, drawing a layout of the gym on the ground with stones. However, as the plan progressed, Jennifer found that there seemed to be a conflict between Jack and Tom. Jack was more cautious, while Tom was a little impulsive. The 2 often quarreled over some details. Once, in order to choose the escape route after kidnapping Pete, the 2 almost fought. Jennifer watched them quarreling, worried and helpless, worried that their conflict would affect the implementation of the plan, but she didn't dare to show it easily, so she could only persuade them carefully. In this basement full of depression and danger, Jennifer was always alert to the kidnappers' every move, while constantly perfecting the revenge plan in her mind. She knew that this was her only chance, and if she failed, the consequences would be disastrous. But her resentment for Pete and her desire for freedom made her firm in her belief that she would make Pete get the punishment he deserved no matter what. Chapter 3. Planning Revenge. In the dim and damp basement, the dim light flickered as if it would go out at any time. Jennifer, Jack and Tom sat together with various rough tools and crumpled papers placed beside them. This was the battlefield where they planned revenge. In the next few days, Jennifer and the two kidnappers hid in this basement and planned the action intensively. Relying on her years of understanding of Pete, Jennifer carefully told Jack and Tom about his daily schedule, living habits and the company's security situation. Pete will arrive at the company on time at 9 o'clock every morning. He is used to walking through the employee passage, where the security is relatively lax. Jennifer said while drawing the company's layout map on the ground with a branch. There is a back door in the company. Usually no one goes there. We can go in from there and take him out. Jack and Tom were busy preparing various tools and vehicles. They got a few sharp daggers, a few pairs of handcuffs, and a van without a license plate to transfer Pete. Jennifer looked at these things and Pete's horrified expression kept appearing in her mind, and her anger and determination became stronger. She remembered Pete's indifference and ruthlessness to her, and the cruelty of her in-laws when they drove her out of the house. Those painful memories came like a tide, and every picture seemed to add fuel to her determination for revenge. This time I will never let him have an easy time. Jennifer secretly swore in her heart that she would let Pete taste the taste of being betrayed and abandoned, and make him lose everything he cared about. As the plan gradually took shape, new problems followed. Jack and Tom had serious differences in the division of labor. Jack believed that he was experienced and should be responsible for the most important kidnapping link, and get the ransom as soon as Pete was controlled, while Tom felt that he was better at dealing with emergencies and advocated that he should handle the communication with Pete. He firmly believed that he could get more valuable information from Pete. The two insisted on their own opinions and refused to give in to each other. The fierce quarrel continued to echo in the basement. Jennifer sat aside, frowning, watching them quietly. She understood that such a quarrel would only bring the plan to a standstill, and she had to find a way to solve it. When the two calmed down a little, Jennifer cleared her throat and said, "Stop arguing and listen to me. Jack, you are familiar with tools and vehicles. Force control during kidnapping really requires people like you, so there is no problem for you to be responsible for the kidnapping. Tom, you have a straightforward personality. If Pete dares to play tricks, you will definitely be able to calm him down. It is your job to communicate with him. We are people on the same boat. Only with a clear division of labor and concerted efforts can we get the 30 million. No one can do without each other." After listening to Jennifer's words, the two nodded thoughtfully and stopped arguing temporarily. But Jennifer could feel that the conflict between them was not completely eliminated, but was temporarily suppressed. In addition to the internal conflicts among the kidnappers, the urgency of time also made Jennifer feel stressed. Pete acted cautiously and his daily schedule could change at any time. Once, Jennifer saw on TV news that Pete had changed the time of a business meeting at the last minute, which made her heart tighten suddenly. She knew that she had to speed up the implementation of the plan, otherwise all her efforts would be in vain once Pete noticed something was wrong. During the preparation process, Jennifer also found that Jack and Tom did not completely trust her. They would check her actions from time to time and would consider her proposals again and again. Once, Jennifer suggested installing a tracker on Pete's car to more accurately grasp his whereabouts. Jack looked at her suspiciously and asked, "Are you trying to tip off the police?" Jennifer explained helplessly, "If I wanted to call the police, I would have done it long ago. Why would I wait until now? I'm just like you. I'm looking forward to getting the 30 million. Only by successfully catching Pete can we achieve our goal." After some explanation, Jack dispelled his doubts. Despite the difficulties, Jennifer did not back down. She used her wisdom to try to coordinate the relationships between all parties and perfect every detail of the plan. She carefully studied the security system of Pete's company to find possible loopholes. She also recalled Pete's daily habits, speculated on his possible response methods, and thought of a response strategy in advance. Finally, after several days of intense preparation, all preparations were basically ready. The van was filled with gas and hidden in a hidden abandoned factory. The tools and weapons were wiped clean and neatly placed in a worn backpack. They also developed a detailed retreat route to avoid the densely monitored areas in the city. Jennifer took a deep breath and looked at everything in front of her. She was excited about the upcoming revenge and worried about the unknown. She knew that a thrilling contest was about to begin and they had no way back. Chapter 4. Revenge. The night was like a huge piece of black silk, gently but coldly covering the entire city. Neon lights flashed in the streets and alleys, vehicles shuttled through them and pedestrians hurried. Everything seemed normal but it was hidden. Jennifer hid in a dark alley near Pitt's company. Her heartbeat was like a drum, hitting her chest heavily with every beat. She was wearing a black tights, her hair tied tightly behind her head, and her eyes revealed determination and firmness. Beside her, Jack and Tom were also dressed in black with black paint on their faces. They held their weapons tightly, looking nervous and excited. According to the plan, Jack and Tom disguised themselves as couriers, pushing a cart full of parcels, and swaggering towards the employee passage of Pitt's company. The security guard at the employee passage was sitting in the booth playing with his mobile phone boredly. When he saw the two people coming, he just raised his head casually. Jack smiled, raised the package in his hand and said in a hearty voice, "Hello, there is a courier from Mr. Pitt Harris and he needs to sign for it in person." The security guard frowned, hesitated for a moment and still opened the access control, motioning them to go in. The two entered the building smoothly and Jennifer quickly followed. She was very familiar with the environment here. She took Jack and Tom to cleverly avoid the patrolling security guards and headed towards Pete's office. Along the way, their footsteps were as light as ghosts, making almost no sound. At this time, Pete was busy processing documents in the office. He was not aware of the approaching danger and was still worried about the company's business. Suddenly, the door of the office was slammed open, and Jack and Tom rushed in like evil spirits. Pete raised his head in horror, and before he could react, Jack had rushed forward and put a pistol to his head. "Don't move!" Jack shouted loudly and his voice echoed in the empty office. Pete's eyes were round, his face was full of fear and his hands were raised subconsciously. Jennifer walked into the office slowly, looking at Pete's terrified expression, and a complex emotion surged in her heart, with the pleasure of revenge and the pain of being betrayed. She stepped forward and said coldly, "Pete, you finally fell into my hands." Pete saw Jennifer and was first surprised and mouthful, then roared angrily, "Are you crazy? Let me go. Do you know the consequences of your doing this?" Jennifer smiled, and there was no warmth in her smile. "You never thought of letting me go at the beginning, now you have tasted the taste of being abandoned." She asked Jack and Tom to tie up Pete. Pete struggled desperately and kept cursing, but everything was in vain. Jennifer began to search for evidence of Pete's cheating and financial fraud in the office. She knew some of Pete's habits and soon found some important documents and photos in a hidden safe. These documents recorded in detail Pete's dealings with his lover and his illegal operations in the company's finances. At the same time, Jack and Tom began to clean up the scene to ensure that there were no traces that were unfavorable to them. They destroyed all the monitoring equipment in the office and took away Pete's mobile phone and computer to prevent him from sending out a distress signal on the way. Jennifer contacted the media reporters who had communicated with her before, sent them copies of the evidence, and told them to release it on time in an hour. Then they took Pete to the van parked at the back door of the company. Along the way, Pete kept struggling and yelling, but Jennifer and the kidnappers turned a deaf ear to him. After returning to their pre-prepared hiding place, an abandoned warehouse, Jennifer confirmed the release of the evidence again. Soon, Pete's scandal spread like wildfire throughout the city. Major media reported one after another, with headlines one more explosive than the other. Well-known entrepreneur Pete Harris cheated, financial fraud scandal exposed, and Pete Harris's business empire is in danger. Pete's company stock price plummeted in just a few minutes, and countless investors withdrew their capital. His lover also drew a line with him at the first time, issuing a statement saying that she had no knowledge of it. Pete heard the news in the warehouse and shouted hysterically, his voice becoming hoarse with anger and despair. "You can't do this to me. I'm Pete Harris, I have plenty of money, I can give you more." Pete struggled frantically, trying to persuade Jennifer and the kidnappers. But Jennifer just looked at him coldly, without a trace of pity in her heart. "Do you think money can solve everything? You are wrong. The pain you have brought me cannot be compensated by any amount of money." Jennifer's voice was low and firm. However, things did not go so smoothly. Just when they thought everything was under control, there was a sudden sound of a car engine outside the warehouse. Jennifer's face turned pale in an instant, and she realized that it might be Pete's men who came. Jack and Tom also became nervous. They clenched their weapons and looked at the door of the warehouse vigilantly. What should I do? They must be here to rescue Pete. Tom's voice was a little trembling. Although he was a kidnapper, he was still a little flustered in the face of such an emergency. Jennifer took a deep breath and tried to calm herself down. She quickly thought about the response strategy and her eyes scanned the warehouse, looking for something that could be used. Suddenly she saw some abandoned oil barrels in the corner and had an idea. Let's hide first, and when they come in we will use these oil barrels to create chaos, and then find a way to break out. Jennifer said in a low voice. Jack and Tom nodded and followed her instructions, hiding behind the oil barrels, waiting for the enemy to arrive. The door of the warehouse was slowly pushed open, and several men with weapons walked in carefully. They looked around looking for Pete's figure. Just as they walked to the center of the warehouse, Jennifer pushed down an oil barrel with force, and the oil barrel rolled down the slope with a loud noise. The men were startled by the sudden movement, and quickly turned around and shot in the direction of the oil barrel. While they were in a panic, Jack and Tom rushed out from their hiding place and started a fierce exchange of fire with the other side. Jennifer took the opportunity to untie the rope on Pete and pulled him behind her as a hostage. Don't move. If you move again I will kill him. Jennifer shouted loudly. The men had to stop what they were doing. Just when the two sides were deadlocked, sirens suddenly sounded in the distance. It turned out that the nearby residents heard the gunshots and called the police. Jennifer was delighted when she heard the sirens. She knew that this might be their chance to get out of trouble. She pointed her gun at Pete and retreated towards the warehouse door. Jack and Tom covered behind them and slowly moved towards the door. In the end, Jennifer and the kidnappers successfully escaped from the warehouse before the police arrived. They threw Pete on the side of the road and drove away into the night. Although this revenge operation encountered some twists and turns, Jennifer knew that Pete's good days were over and he would pay a heavy price for his actions. Chapter 5. Counterattack in Crisis. After learning that Jennifer had planned all this, Pete seemed to be engulfed by the flames of anger and lost all reason. His originally handsome face became hideous due to twisted anger, his eyes were bloodshot, and he paced back and forth in the dark room where he was temporarily hiding like a mad beast, with heavy anger in every step, and kept cursing Jennifer's name. This damn woman dared to betray me, I must make her pay a heavy price. Pete gnashed his teeth and roared. He knew that he was in a desperate situation now. His business empire was crumbling and his reputation was ruined, but he would never be willing to be defeated by Jennifer. Although Pete's wealth shrank significantly after the scandal was exposed, the connections he had accumulated over the years were intertwined, like a huge spider web. He suppressed his anger and made one phone call after another. With his eloquence and past friendships, he used his remaining network of connections and hired a group of fierce private detectives and thugs at a high price. These people were all tough guys who had been struggling in the dark world for many years. After receiving the task, they quickly searched every corner of the city like sharks smelling blood, vowing to find Jennifer. At the same time, the police also began to fully intervene in the investigation of Pete's kidnapping. The busy figures of the police can be seen in the streets and alleys. They visited witnesses, collected clues, and did not miss any details. In the police station, the police officer in charge of the case frowned, looking at the piles of case materials, thinking in his heart that this case was not simple at all, and there seemed to be a deeper secret behind it. With the help of Jack and Tom, Jennifer was like a frightened bird, constantly changing her hiding place. They moved from the abandoned factory to the dilapidated warehouse, and then from the warehouse to the remote abandoned house. Every transfer was done carefully, not daring to leave any trace. Jennifer knew Pete's methods well, so she dared not slack off and remained vigilant at all times. However, Pete's pursuit was like an invisible net, tightening and tightening, putting Jennifer in danger all the time. Once, less than half an hour after they left a hiding place, Pete's men rushed in aggressively. The thugs were holding weapons, looking for them everywhere in the room, cursing. "We must not let that woman run away. The boss said that there will be a big reward for finding her." The leading strong man said viciously. They turned the room upside down but found nothing, so they could only leave in a rage. Jennifer, Jack and Tom hid in the bushes not far away, not daring to breathe, watching them leave with fear in their hearts. In this tense situation, Jack and Tom also began to doubt Jennifer. They originally thought that they could get 30 million ransom and live a carefree life with Jennifer. But now they are involved in such a dangerous storm and may lose their lives at any time. I think Jennifer is unreliable. What if she betrays us to protect herself? Tom said to Jack worriedly. Jack also frowned. He was worried. I think something is wrong. The plans she mentioned before seemed too risky now. Jennifer noticed their changes and complained in her heart. She knew that once she lost the trust and support of the two kidnappers, she would be even more isolated and helpless. So she decided to find an opportunity to have a good talk with them. One night in the new hiding place, Jennifer looked at Jack and Tom and said sincerely, I know you have doubts about me, but we are in the same boat now. If I betray you, I can't escape myself. Only if we work together can we get rid of Pete's pursuit and get the money. Jack and Tom looked at each other and remained silent. Jennifer continued, I have thought of the next plan. We can use Pete's eagerness to find me to set a trap to counter him. As long as we succeed, we can not only get rid of danger, but also get more money. Hearing the words more money, Jack and Tom's eyes flashed with greed. Although they still have doubts in their hearts under the temptation of money, they decided to trust Jennifer again. However, time is running out and Jennifer has little time left. Pete's men are like mad dogs, looking for their traces everywhere. The police investigation is getting deeper and deeper, and Jennifer feels as if she is in a desperate situation surrounded by enemies. In order to implement the counterattack plan, Jennifer began to collect more evidence about Pete's crimes. Through various channels, she contacted some people who had been bullied by Pete and obtained some key information from them. At the same time, she also closely followed Pete's every move, trying to find his flaws. Jack and Tom also followed Jennifer's instructions and prepared various tools and weapons for the upcoming showdown. Although they were still uneasy, they gradually regained some confidence with Jennifer's constant encouragement. On a stormy night, Jennifer received news that Pete's men seemed to have discovered their whereabouts and were rushing towards their hiding place. Jennifer's heart tightened suddenly, and she knew that the moment of the decisive battle was coming. She took a deep breath, looked at Jack and Tom and said firmly, We can't sit and wait for death. It's time to fight back. The three of them acted quickly and set some simple traps around the hiding place to prepare for the arrival of Pete's men. Jennifer's heartbeat accelerated rapidly, and she clenched the weapon in her hand, feeling both nervous and expectant. She knew that this battle would determine their fate. If they failed, they would be doomed, but if they succeeded, they would completely get rid of Pete's threat and usher in a new life. Chapter 6. Climax and Turning Point. On a stormy night, the wind howled like a beast and the big raindrops hit the ground, splashing layers of water. Lightning flashed across the dark night sky, illuminating the abandoned warehouse, reflecting the nervous and vigilant faces of Jennifer, Jack, and Tom. They hid in the warehouse for several days, thinking that it was hidden enough, but they were still found by Pete's men. We can't let them run away this time. The leading man shouted at the top of his voice and the rain slid down his cheeks. He waved his hand and more than a dozen armed men behind him spread out in a fan shape and carefully advanced into the warehouse. These men of Pete have been in the underworld for many years and are ruthless. At this moment there is a fierce light in their eyes, vowing to complete the task. Jennifer and the other two hid behind a pile of dilapidated wooden boxes, not daring to breathe too heavily. Jennifer's palms were full of sweat, and she tightly grasped a pistol, which was their only self-defense weapon. Jack and Tom were also nervous, with fear and unwillingness in their eyes, constantly observing the surroundings, looking for opportunities to escape. What should we do? There are too many of them. Tom lowered his voice with a tremor. Jennifer gritted her teeth and looked firm. Don't panic, let's find a way to delay time first. Just then one of the men accidentally kicked a wooden board on the ground, making a clang sound. Be careful. They may be hiding nearby. The big man shouted vigilantly, and the men immediately raised their weapons and fired at the surroundings. Bullets hit the wooden boxes, sawdust flew, and Jennifer and others were suppressed and couldn't raise their heads. Taking advantage of the gap when the enemy changed the magazine, Jack suddenly stood up and threw a homemade smoke bomb at the enemy. Go! He shouted, and the three of them ran to the other side of the warehouse under the cover of smoke. But Pete's men quickly reacted and chased after her. In a panic, Jennifer was tripped by the debris on the ground and fell heavily to the ground. She struggled to get up, but found that her ankle was in great pain as if it was sprained. Pete's men saw this and immediately surrounded her with a smug smile on their faces. "Now let's see where you can run." The big man approached step by step, pointing the gun at Jennifer's head. Jennifer looked at everything in front of her in despair. Her heart was full of fear, but she was still unwilling to be caught like this. At this critical moment she suddenly remembered a secret that Pete had accidentally said. He had a secret safe, which contained some things that were not allowed to be seen in the light, enough to completely ruin his reputation. Jennifer had an idea. She pretended to be calm and shouted, "Come if you want to die." She took the opportunity to crawl towards an iron box in the corner of the warehouse. After opening it, there were indeed some important documents inside. Pete's men hesitated when they saw this. They knew Pete's methods. If these documents were really evidence against him, they would not have a good ending if they were leaked. Jennifer seized the opportunity, threw the documents into the air and said loudly, "These are all evidence of Pete's crimes. Whoever gets them will get a lot of money." When those people heard this, greed flashed in their eyes. Under the temptation of money, they instantly forgot their mission and scrambled for the documents. The originally neat team suddenly became a mess. Some people fought to grab the documents and the warehouse was in chaos. Jack and Tom took the opportunity to return, helped Jennifer up and prepared to escape. But just when they were about to reach the door of the warehouse, they found that the retreat was blocked by a car. It turned out that another of Pete's men had arrived. "It seems that none of you can leave today." The new men sneered. Jennifer and others were forced into a dead end, and the situation fell into despair again. However, at this moment of despair, sirens were heard in the distance. It turned out that nearby residents heard gunshots and fighting in the warehouse and called the police. When Pete's men heard the sirens, they panicked. They didn't want to be caught by the police, so they dropped their documents and fled. When the police arrived, they quickly took control of the situation. Jennifer and others were taken to the police station. Although they were temporarily safe, Jennifer knew that the matter was not over yet. She provided the police with evidence of Pete's crime and the process of these people chasing them. The police decided to conduct further investigations on Pete based on these clues. In the police station, Jennifer sat tiredly in a chair, recalling the thrilling scene just now with a lot of emotion in her heart. She knew that this road to revenge was full of hardships and dangers, but she never thought of giving up. Although this crisis was extremely thrilling, it also brought her a turning point. She looked forward to Pete getting the punishment he deserved, and also looked forward to herself being able to truly get rid of the past and usher in a new life. Chapter 7. Ending and Rebirth. In the small interrogation room, the light was pale and dazzling, and Pete was imprisoned in a chair like a trapped beast. His hair was messy and his eyes were full of anger and unwillingness, but also revealed deep despair. Jennifer stood on the other side of the one-way glass, looking at him quietly without a ripple in her heart. The love and hatred that had been engraved in her heart turned into dust at this moment. "Pete Harris, according to the evidence we have, you are suspected of multiple crimes including financial fraud, cheating to break up the family, and illegally hiring people for revenge and hunting." The prosecutor's voice echoed in the interrogation room, and every word was like a heavy hammer hitting Pete's heart hard. Pete opened his mouth and wanted to refute, but found that he had nothing to say. The evidence was like a mountain which made him breathless. In the following days the case progressed rapidly. In court, Jennifer testified as a key witness. She described Peter's crimes and her suffering in a clear and logical manner. Her voice was firm and powerful, and her eyes showed unquestionable determination. Peter's parents, John and Mary, originally wanted to use their connections to exonerate their son, but as more and more evidence came, their efforts came to nothing. In the end, Peter was convicted of multiple crimes and sentenced to a heavy sentence. His business empire collapsed completely, and those friends and so-called partners who once surrounded him scattered. John and Mary were also implicated and they lost all their wealth and status. They used to be high and mighty, but now they can only recall their past glory and wealth in a simple rental house and regret it. Jennifer, after successfully taking revenge, was not blinded by hatred. She knew that life had to go on. Jennifer used part of Peter's confiscated property to start building her own business. She plunged into the business world and quickly emerged in the business world with her wisdom and courage, as well as the experience she had accumulated in the past. Her company focuses on public welfare environmental protection projects, aiming to create value for society and also give new meaning to her life. The road to entrepreneurship is not smooth. She encountered countless difficulties and challenges, but she survived every time with her tenacious perseverance and indomitable spirit. At the same time, Jennifer did not forget Jack and Tom. After the case was over, she visited them in prison. When the two saw Jennifer, they had both guilt and gratitude in their eyes. "Jennifer, I'm sorry we doubted you before." Jack lowered his head, his voice full of self-blame. Jennifer smiled and shook her head. "It's all over. I know you are also for your own benefit, but I still want to thank you. You accompanied me through those difficult days." She sat in the visitor chair, folded her hands, looked at them seriously and said, "You have to be responsible for your actions, but this is also an opportunity to start over. I hope you can reform yourself in prison and become a new person after you come out." Jack and Tom nodded silently. Under the influence of Jennifer, they began to reflect on their lives. In prison, they actively participated in labor and study, worked hard to improve themselves, and were determined to turn over a new leaf and start a new life after they were released from prison. As time went by, Jennifer's career gradually got on the right track. Her company grew larger and larger, and her employees admired her very much, not only because of her outstanding leadership ability, but also because of her kind and upright character. In her spare time, Jennifer also began to re-examine her life. She participated in various social activities, met many like-minded friends, and her life became colorful. One day, Jennifer stood in front of the French window of the company building, overlooking the entire city. The sun shines on her face, reflecting her confident and calm smile. Recalling the road of revenge she has walked, the pain and struggle she once experienced seem to be still before her eyes, but she knows that she has completely transformed. She is no longer the poor woman abandoned by her husband and in-laws, but an independent, strong and brave New Age woman. "Jennifer, there is an important meeting. Are you ready?" The assistant's voice interrupted her thoughts. Jennifer turned around, took a deep breath, smiled and said, "I'm ready, let's go." She walked towards the meeting room with firm steps, full of expectations for the future. She knew that all this was just the beginning and there would be more challenges and opportunities waiting for her in the future, but she was not afraid, because she already had the courage and strength to face everything.